Thank you for the opportunity. Maybe just, if I may, by a show of hands, are there any Chief Information Security Officers or heads of security in the room today? CISOs? Any CISOs? Not strongly represented today. I think we can safely and respectfully maybe have a few moments of respectful silence for our CISOs, because I think it's fair to say that most of them, or many of them, actually suffer generalized anxiety, right? And the reason is that fundamentally, let me just pause here for a moment. I think I just need to advance the slides. I think they suffer anxiety. Thank you. The point I was making earlier is that CISOs are faced with very significant security risk. They have to think about what the impact in terms of financial and reputational risk their organization will take when there is a breach. Now, there are many industry reports available from analysts and from vendors like VMware that indicate that data breach would be a significant consideration for CISOs. The fact is that motivated attackers are actually the number one risk faced by organizations like the banking sector. And even those companies that are well protected, that own very sophisticated perimeter defenses and agent-based security solutions, remain vulnerable to these attacks. Sir, can we advance to the next slide, please? So if we look at this example, an attacker would gain access through compromised credentials to a VDI desktop, as an example, and would then move laterally within the environment to actually reach valuable data within the bank's database environment. It is at this point where data can be encrypted, as you know, for ransom purposes, but about 60% of attacks also involve exfiltration. So this means that even though a ransom may have been paid, there might be secondary effects to that breach. Now, every 11 seconds, an enterprise falls victim to ransomware attacks. And today, as we gather here today, more than 4,000 enterprises would have been affected by ransomware attacks. The cost to the industry, more than $20 billion in 2021. So why is this the case? Let's consider the traditional perimeter security environment. We have a 3-tier application hosted in a data center somewhere, and it is protected by a perimeter defense. However, applications have changed. What we've heard this afternoon is there's a very strong adoption to microservices, the exposure of APIs, and this means that these applications are no longer just virtual machine form factor applications. They become orchestrated on demand, and they are highly distributed. Also, the data center infrastructures have evolved. It's no longer just my data center on-prem. It's no longer just my private cloud. I'm utilizing infrastructure provided by a mega scaler potentially, or by a VMware partner as an example. And lastly, the endpoint or the branch has evolved. It's not only my user sitting at a bank branch location, but they want to work from home, they want to be able to work from anywhere. And by the way, endpoints have evolved. APIs are actually the new endpoints. So these three dynamics are actually distributing the perimeter. So the traditional zone-based approach to security, where I have a strong perimeter defense is certainly no longer effective in the modern architecture. So what we have done with this recognition that the east-west communications between workloads are actually the new security frontier to be protected. And what we have done with our technology is to actually implement it in a distributed architecture in order to address the east-west direction of the attack vectors. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is a framework often used by CISOs to understand what attack stages are actually used against an infrastructure. And when we look at these attack stages, according to the framework, the majority of the stages are actually in the east-west direction. It's not just the initial access into the environment, but the lateral movement within the environment. So VMware has taken the traditional perimeter defense technologies implemented with firewalling, IDS, IPS, and sensors, and we have distributed that in kernel within our infrastructure. So you can think of these traditional appliances now living distributed across the infrastructure. So the benefits that we derive from that architecture is firstly agentless microsegmentation. So this is the ability to determine exactly which workload can communicate to which other workload. So it's policy-driven, it's enforced across the infrastructure, not at a central point, and it will only limit the communication surface for the application to those workloads that are relevant to that application only. Secondly, we look at the traffic behavior. What traffic patterns are associated with normal application access and normal application usage patterns, and what traffic patterns are associated with attack patterns. And this is what we can detect, and we build the necessary intelligence around that. Then even if a communication is allowed for legitimate purposes between two workloads, we have to inspect what that communication contains. So we look inside of the flow to see if there are any known vulnerabilities crossing that connection path. Now, the aggregation of these technologies, the network traffic analysis, which we refer to in this slide as the tabless NTA, the distributed sandboxing to look at digital content and the behaviors of the content, and the distributed IDS/IPS to look at signatures for known vulnerabilities and attacks, are aggregated into what we call the network detection and response capability. Now, this technology has been submitted to various third-party testing labs. The most prominent, probably SE Labs in the UK. They tested our technology last year. They launched the most sophisticated attacks that are seen in the financial sector and in the government sector against our technology, and we achieved the industry's first AAA rating, meaning that 100% of the attacks were actually detected. So, in a nutshell, the deployment, the ease of deployment of this microsegmentation security technology is a major factor to determine the success of the security investment. The reduced operational overhead and the fact that you're looking at all of the traffic in the environment is very, very critical. So we would very much love to engage with you in terms of this technology and the value it can add to your organization. Thank you for your attendance.